All right, let's take a look at adding and subtracting integers on a number line. So let's take a look at this. We're looking at 4 positives plus 3 negatives. So I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to go over to 4 positives. And since I'm adding, I'm going to go to the right. I'm going to add 3 positives. So 4 positives plus 3 positives leaves us at positive 7. So let's take a look at this one. I am going to go to positive 7. So I have positive 7. I'm going to add 3 negatives. So I am going to add, but since I'm adding 3 negatives, I'm actually going to move backwards. So I have 7 positives, and since I'm adding 3 negatives, I'm going to move backwards, and I'm left with positive 4. Let's take a look at this next one. I have 6 negatives plus 3 negatives. So I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to go down to negative 6. I'm going to add 3 negatives. So normally when I add, I'd want to go to the right, but since I'm adding 3 negatives, I'm going to go to the left. So I have 6 negatives, and I'm adding 3 more negatives. I'm left with negative 9. You can see where I'm left at. So I'd like to take a look at this next one. So I'm starting at 0. I'm going to go to negative 10. And I'm going to add 2 positives. So I want to go to the right. And since they're positive, I can keep going to the right. So I'm at negative 8. So again, let's take a look at this. Negative 10 plus positive 2. I'm left with negative 8. Negative 6, and I had to back down to negative 3, negative 9. I went to positive 7, and I had to add 3 negatives, so I had to move backwards to 4. And I went to 4 positives, and I added 3 positives, and I'm at positive 7. Let's take a look at what this looks like when I'm subtracting. It's the same concept on the number line. Okay, so right here, let's start at positive 7. So I'm going to start at 0, and I'm going to go to positive 7. I'm subtracting, so I do need to go to the left because I'm subtracting 9 positives. So I'm going to go, there's 7, 8, 9, and I end up at negative 2. So if I think of that, if I have $7 and I'm spending 9, I am going to be below 0. I'm going to be at negative 2. So let's try this next one. So I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to go to negative 6. And I'm going to go down. I'm going to subtract 3 more positives. I'm left at negative 9. So let's try this one. I'm going to have positive 7 subtract a negative 2. So I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to go to positive 7. Now I do want to subtract, so I want to go backwards, but I'm subtracting a negative 2, so I end up having to go the other direction. So I end up at positive 9. So let's try this one. So negative 5, I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to go to negative 5. I'm going to subtract a negative 3. So I do want to go subtract. I want to go to the left, but since the negative, I end up going the opposite. So I have to back up 3, and I end up with 2, negative 2. So negative 5 subtract negative 3 is negative 2. 7 subtract negative 2. I ended up at 9. Negative 6 subtract positive 3. I ended up at negative 9. And 7 subtract 9. I ended up at negative 2. And if you remember your teachers doing this before, you can also just think of this as adding the inverse or adding the opposite. So what we did in the previous page, if I went to 7 and I added a negative 9, I would still end up at negative 2. So you can think of it that way as well. So anytime you have subtraction, it will work. So if I add the inverse or add the opposite, I had a subtraction, and the opposite of positive 3 is a negative 3. So if I went down negative 6 and I added negative 3 more, I'd be at negative 9. Add the inverse, add the opposite. So 7 plus 2, I went 7 positives plus 2 more positives. Same with this one. I add the opposite, negative 5 plus positive 3. So I went down negative 5 and went back up 3. You'll get the same answers. Okay, let's go ahead and give these a try. You can pause the video. You can think of the number line if you want to, and then we'll check our answers. Okay, so 8 plus 20, I can think of it as moving 8 and adding 20 more. Oop, I guess we'll just move it. Oh boy, something. Okay, here we go. All right, so negative 15, if I went down negative 15 and I added negative 3 more, I'm at negative 18. If I'm at 17, I move way up here and I back down 19 or add negative 19, I'm going to be below 0. I'm going to be at negative 2. And if you notice, that's just the difference between them. I have more negatives than positives. So let's take a look at this one. I have more positives than I do negatives, so my answer will end up being positive. So let's think of that number line. If I go down to negative 6, and I'm adding 20 more, 20 subtract the negative 6 is going to leave me with 14. Okay, so let's take a look at these ones down here. You can think of the number line, or you can think of adding the opposite on the number line as well. So if I have negative 13, I'd move way down there, and I'm subtracting a negative 5. I want to go that way, but since it's a negative, I have to back up. So if I have negative 13, subtract negative 5, I end up at negative 8. And if you wanted to add the opposite and think of that way on the number line, you can too. So 13 negatives plus 5 positives is going to leave me at negative 8. All right, let's try this one. Negative 9, subtract 16. I could think of add the opposite, or I can think of the number line, negative 9. I'm taking off 16 more positives. I'm going to be way down to negative 25. Same with this one. I go all the way up to positive 7. That's where I'm starting at. And I want to subtract negative 11. So I want to subtract and go left, but since it's a negative 11, I'm going to end up moving that way. So if I add the opposite, you can see that as well. So 7 plus 11, or 7 subtract negative 11 is positive 18. So this one, 20 subtract 3, you can picture 20 over here. I'm taking off 3 positives, 17. All right, I hope this helped, and good luck.